So today we're going to talk about a man you might not know by name, but whose story is absolutely essential to understanding modern Africa. We're talking about Herbert Macaulay, a man they call the architect, and really the father of Nigerian nationalism.
In his life, it helps us answer this really fundamental question. How does a colony, this artificial thing created by an empire, turn itself into a real nation with its own identity? To even begin to get that, we have to go back to the world he was born into.
All right, picture this. It's the late 1800s. European leaders gather at a conference in Berlin, and they literally carve up the continent of Africa with rulers on a map. The place that would become Nigeria, well, it wasn't a country. It was this huge area with dozens of completely separate ethnic nations, Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa Fulani, so many others, all suddenly smashed together under British rule. It wasn't a nation, it was a business venture.
And right into this imperial experiment, a man is born. And his story is just full of irony because he starts out as a loyal subject, an engineer, helping to build the very empire he would later dedicate his life to challenging.
Herbert Macaulay was born in Lagos in 1864, and he was born into the elite. Now, resistance was basically in his blood. His own father, you see, had this method of writing these incredibly structured formal protest letters to defend African rights. So Herbert learned from a young age that the best way to fight back wasn't with random rebellion, but with smart, methodical, well-documented arguments. He was so brilliant, in fact, that he won a government scholarship to go study in Britain. And in 1893, he comes back home as Nigeria's very first certified civil engineer, a total pioneer.
So this is the key thing to grasp at first. He started on the inside. He was the surveyor of crown lands, designing buildings, planning infrastructure. Think about that. He was using his incredible skills to literally build the physical structures of the British Empire, right there in his own home.
But being an insider gives you a front row seat to all the system's ugly secrets and its deep injustices. And for Macaulay, it was one of those moments, one personal experience, that completely changed the trajectory of his life.
Just look at these numbers. It's so blatant. As the country's first qualified civil engineer, his salary maxed out at £150. Meanwhile, a junior British colleague, a guy working in the same department, was making £250. This wasn't just about the money, right? It was a slap in the face. It was the system telling him, loud and clear, this is all you're worth to us.
So what did he do? He walked away. In 1898, after only 5 years on the job, he resigned. He was just 34 years old, and he decided right then and there he would never, ever work for the colonial government again. That was it. The end of Herbert Macaulay, engineer for the empire.
So the question is, how do you fight back against a whole empire? Well, Macaulay didn't just get angry. He got strategic. He took that same methodical, detail-oriented brain, the mind of an engineer, and applied it to a completely different problem: how to build a resistance movement from the ground up.
And what he came up with was, well, it was a blueprint, a master plan. He drew on the lessons from his father and built this three-part attack. First, journalism. He bought a newspaper, the Lagos Daily News, to control the narrative and get his message out. Second, he used the law, advising on huge court cases against the government. And third, he built an actual political machine, the NNDP, which was Nigeria's very first political party.
And you know what? It worked. He started landing these incredible victories. In one case, he helped argue all the way to the highest court in England and won, getting them to recognize traditional land rights. Then, he got the British to reverse their deportation of the traditional ruler of Lagos. These weren't just dusty legal wins. This was him beating the British at their own game, using their own courts to protect his people. It was a huge deal.
But of course, when you start winning battles like that, you make powerful enemies. The more effective Macaulay became, the bigger a threat he was, and the colonial government was not going to just sit back and let this happen, which brings us to the final defining chapter of his life.
2. What does that number mean? That's how many times the British colonial government threw Herbert Macaulay in prison. The first time was on some trumped-up charges about mismanaging an estate, and the second was for a newspaper article they just didn't like.
But here's the ultimate irony. Their attempts to silence him completely backfired. Prison didn't break him. It just made him bigger. They thought they could shut him up, but what they actually did was turn him from just a critic into a living symbol of the entire struggle. He became a hero.
And he kept on fighting, right up to the very end. In 1946, he was 81 years old and still touring the country, rallying people when he fell ill and passed away. His last words really say it all. After you have mourned me for a week, continue with the struggle.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? I think the story of Herbert Macaulay is this powerful reminder that nations, they don't just appear on a map. They aren't inevitable. They are built, piece by piece, brick by brick, by individuals who have the courage and the vision to stand up and, organize hope.
He never got to see an independent Nigeria, but he absolutely laid the foundation. He was the civil engineer who became the architect of a nation's consciousness. Herbert Macaulay, the father of Nigerian nationalism.